Hello, everyone. I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin. Get comfortable and relax.
The drive to the warehouse took 15 minutes. Compared to the hour-long commute to my previous job, this felt like a vacation. I pulled into the employee parking lot of the large gray building in Newark, New Jersey, 10 minutes early for my first day. The warehouse wasn't much to look at, just a big concrete building with few windows and loading docks along one side. But it was close to my apartment and paid better than my last gig, which was all that mattered right now. I grabbed my lunch from the passenger seat and locked my car, taking a deep breath before walking to the employee entrance. 3 months of unemployment had made me desperate enough to apply anywhere with an opening. When the call came from this place, I jumped at the offer without asking too many questions. The door buzzed when I pressed the intercom and I stepped into a small reception area where a man waited for me. He looked to be in his late 40s with short salt and pepper hair and a friendly smile that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. "Thomas Wright?" he asked, extending his hand. "I'm Jack Peterson, warehouse manager. Good to have you on board." I shook his hand. "Thanks for the opportunity. And please call me Tom. Tom it is." Jack nodded. "Let's get your paperwork sorted, then I'll show you around." We spent the next half hour in his office filling out forms while he explained the basics of the job. Normal stuff about inventory management, shipping procedures, and break schedules. Jack had an easy way of talking that made the information flow naturally. He sometimes ran a hand through his hair when making a point, and his desk was organized but not super neat. "Ready to see the place?" he asked once we finished the paperwork. The tour started with the break room and locker area, then moved to the main warehouse floor. The space was huge, with rows of metal shelving going almost to the ceiling, and concrete floors marked with yellow lines showing the walkways. Forklifts buzzed in the distance, and workers moved between the aisles quickly like they'd done it a million times before. "We handle everything from electronics to furniture to seasonal goods," Jack explained as we walked. "Main shipping area is west, receiving is east, and specialized storage is in the north wing." The warehouse smelled like cardboard and the faint tang of cleaning products. Our footsteps sounded loud as we walked through the aisles, Jack pointing out different sections and procedures. "This will be your primary area," he said, gesturing to a section filled with boxed electronics. "You'll be responsible for inventory accuracy and order fulfillment here." I nodded, trying to take in everything at once. The job seemed straightforward enough: track inventory, pull orders, sometimes help with loading, nothing I hadn't done before at other warehouses. After showing me the entire facility, Jack led me back toward his office. His relaxed attitude had carried through most of the tour, but as we approached his door, his face changed. The smile faded and his eyes took on a more serious look. "One more thing before you start," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "We have some specific procedures here that everyone needs to follow." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a typed sheet of paper. The heading read, "Warehouse Rules," in bold letters. He handed it to me with an unexpectedly serious expression. "These aren't suggestions, Tom. They're mandatory for all employees." I took the paper expecting standard safety guidelines about proper lifting techniques or forklift operation. Instead, my eyes landed on a list that made me almost laugh until I noticed Jack wasn't smiling. 1. If the lights go out, exit the building immediately. Do not use flashlights. 2. Never work alone in any section of the warehouse. 3. Ignore any sounds like voices or crying, even if they sound like someone you know. 4. All personnel must exit the warehouse floor during the 10:30 a.m. and 3:15 p.m. breaks. No exceptions. 5. If you get lost, follow the yellow floor lines only. Do not take shortcuts. 6. Never enter the warehouse during a power outage, even if the emergency lights are working. 7. If you see another employee hiding or acting strangely, do not acknowledge them. 8. Avoid looking directly at the tall figure in the shadows. If seen, look away and walk in the opposite direction. 9. Do not remove any items from the warehouse in your personal belongings. 10. If you hear your name called after hours, do not respond and leave immediately. I read the list twice, waiting for Jack to crack a smile and tell me it was a joke they played on new hires. but his face stayed serious, and he kept looking right at me. "This is unusual," I said finally, trying to keep my tone neutral. Jack nodded. "I know how it sounds, but every rule exists for a reason. Some are about efficiency, others about safety." He tapped the paper with his index finger. "I need your word that you'll follow them all, without exception." I looked down at the list again. Rule 8 stuck out like a sore thumb. The tall figure in the shadows. What was that supposed to mean? And why would people be hiding during normal work hours? I wanted to just thank Jack for his time, give him back the paper, and walk out. But after 3 months of eating ramen and dodging my landlord's texts about late rent payments, I couldn't move. The job paid $18 an hour with benefits after 90 days. My bank account couldn't handle another week of unemployment. "Sure," I said, folding the paper and putting it in my pocket. "I'll follow the rules." Jack looked at my face for a moment longer, then nodded, his smile coming back, but not really reaching his eyes. "Good. Let's get you started then." The rest of the morning went by in a blur of training videos and inventory procedures. By lunchtime, I had almost forgotten about the strange list until the 10:30 break came around. I saw all the workers immediately stop what they were doing and head to the break room way faster than you'd expect for a regular break. Jack showed up beside me. "Break time! Everyone off the floor." I followed him to the break room where employees were eating snacks or scrolling through their phones. Nobody looked worried or acted like anything was weird, but I noticed how they all kept away from the door back to the warehouse floor. At 10:45, Jack stood up. "Break's over. Back to work." The afternoon went smoothly. I shadowed a supervisor named Mark who showed me how to process orders and use the inventory tracking system. Around 2:30, I was left on my own to practice pulling items for an order when I spotted a woman ducking behind a pallet several aisles away. She had light brown hair and a ponytail and moved with quick, nervous steps. When she came out from behind the pallet, she looked around like she was checking if anyone had seen her. Our eyes met briefly before she quickly looked away. Later, I ran into her in the break room during the mandatory 3:15 break. "I'm Tom," I said, sitting across from her with my coffee. "First day, Emily Turner," she replied quietly, her eyes darting to the door and back. "Been here about 8 months." "How do you like it?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's a job." Her fingers tapped nervously on the table surface. "Did Jack give you the rules?" I nodded, lowering my voice. "Yeah." "What's that all about?" Emily's eyes opened wider, and she looked around to see if anyone could hear us. "Just follow them," she whispered. She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead stood up quickly. "Gotta get back." The break ended, and we returned to the warehouse floor. I spent the next couple of hours finishing my training tasks, still wondering about the rules and why Emily acted so weird about them. Maybe this place just had strange management or safety rules. Maybe they had power problems or people stealing things, but that didn't explain the tall figure or the voices. As quitting time got closer, I was coming back from dropping off paperwork in Jack's office when I felt cold all of a sudden. The area near the tall storage racks in aisle 14 looked darker than it should, even with the lights on. I slowed down, feeling the hair on my neck stand up. Between 2 rows of shelving, I saw something move from the corner of my eye, something really tall and thin, moving in a weird way that didn't seem human. When I turned to look straight at it, nothing was there, just shelves with boxes and normal dark spots in the early evening. Rule 8 popped into my head. Avoid looking directly at the tall figure in the shadows. I couldn't move for a second, then shook my head. It was just my imagination. Because of those strange rules and first-day stress, I probably saw another worker or maybe just a dark spot from the shelving. That had to be it. But as I walked to the time clock to punch out, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there, something tall and watching. I remembered Jack's serious face when giving me the rules and Emily's nervous looks. What had I gotten myself into? I needed this job, but now I wondered what exactly came with it. On my drive home, I kept checking my mirror more than usual with the list of rules in my pocket. After a week at the warehouse, I'd fallen into a comfortable groove with the job itself. The scanning inventory checks and order fulfillment were straightforward enough. What wasn't normal was how everyone moved around the place. I watched Karen from shipping take an extra 30 seconds to walk around aisle 14 instead of cutting through it to reach the loading dock. Rick always whistled loudly when walking past certain sections as if announcing his presence. Nobody ever mentioned it, but everyone's behavior showed they took the rules seriously. We all had clocks in our heads by now. At exactly 10:25 a.m., employees would start wrapping up whatever they were doing, no matter how urgent. By 10:29, the warehouse floor cleared out completely. I'd asked Mark from receiving about it on my third day. Just how it's done here, he'd said, shrugging as he punched in for his lunch break. Don't overthink it. I wasn't scheduled for inventory duty until my second week. Jack paired me with Emily for my first check in the East Wing, but she'd called in sick that morning. I wasn't worried. The task seemed simple enough and the scanner did most of the work. You're good to handle this on your own, Jack asked, checking his clipboard. I can pull someone else if you're not comfortable. I'll be fine, I said. The job involved scanning barcodes and checking physical counts against the system. Basic stuff. Jack looked up from his clipboard. Remember, rule number 2? I nodded. Rule 2. Never work alone in any section of the warehouse. I thought that meant after hours. It applies all the time, Jack said. Tell you what, I'll have Luis working in the next section over. If you need anything, just call out. I went to the East Wing with my scanner. Luis gave me a nod as he started working on pallets one aisle over. The East Wing had all the seasonal stuff full of Halloween decorations and early Christmas stock. Cardboard skeletons smiled from boxes looking less creepy than those rules taped to the break room wall. The work went smoothly for about an hour. I counted plastic pumpkins and checked their location tags, sometimes making small fixes in the system. Luis whistled without any tune from the next aisle, which felt kind of nice in the big empty space. Then Luis's whistling stopped. I paused, listening. The warehouse sounded different during the day. Forklifts beeping the noise of the ventilation system, occasional announcements over the PA. But now it felt too quiet. The lights blinked. They dimmed for maybe 3 seconds, not going out completely, but enough to freak me out. Rule 1 popped into my mind. If the lights go out, exit the building immediately. Do not use flashlights. I put down my scanner and took a step toward the main aisle. The light steadied, but I was still on edge. I remembered seeing that weird shadow on my first day, the tall figure in the shadows. Luis, I called out. I stepped into the main aisle looking toward where Luis had been working. His scanner sat on a box, but he wasn't anywhere I could see. I noticed something move. Through a gap in the shelving, I spotted Emily crouched behind a stack of pallets across the aisle. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear. She held a finger to her lips, shaking her head slightly. I remembered Rule 7. If you see another employee hiding or acting strangely, do not acknowledge them. I looked away, pretending I hadn't seen her. I felt really nervous as I picked up my scanner and continued working, trying to act normal. But questions kept popping into my head. What was Emily doing here when she'd called in sick? What was she hiding from? The lights went back to normal and the warehouse sounds slowly returned to their usual noise. Luis's whistling started up again, as if he'd never stopped. I didn't ask where he'd gone when I ran into him 10 minutes later. Almost done here, he said cheerfully. You good? Yeah, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Just finishing up. After lunch, I was assigned to help with restocking in aisles 10 through 15. The work was boring enough that my thoughts kept going back to Emily hiding behind those pallets. Had she seen something, or was she hiding from something? I pushed my cart into aisle 12, checking my inventory list for the next items. The air suddenly got really cold, making me look up. It felt 20 degrees colder than just a moment before, like I'd walked into a freezer. My breath clouded in front of my face. At the far end of the aisle stood a figure. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. It was tall, much taller than any person should be, 7, maybe 8 feet high, and it looked all stretched out. The figure was thin, way too thin to be human, and completely still. I couldn't see any clear features, just a dark shape against the bright lights, but I knew it was looking at me. I could feel it watching me. Rule 8. Avoid looking directly at the tall figure in the shadows. If seen, look away and walk in the opposite direction. I dropped my gaze to the floor and turned around, walking quickly back the way I'd come. Sweat ran down my back in the cold air. My legs felt shaky, but I forced myself to walk normally, not run. Running seemed like it would be worse somehow. I didn't look back, not once, not even when I heard what sounded like something moving across the concrete floor behind me. For the rest of the afternoon, I stayed in the well-lit main areas where other employees worked. Nobody mentioned the cold spot in aisle 12, and I didn't bring it up. When the 3:15 break came, I was one of the first people in the break room. Emily sat alone at a corner table. She was scrolling through her phone and eating an apple. She gave me a small nod when I walked in, but didn't invite conversation. I got coffee from the machine and sat at an empty table trying to figure out what had happened. The figure in aisle 12 couldn't have been human. No costume could make someone look like that. And the cold, that weird cold that came out of nowhere. Jack came into the break room and poured himself coffee. He looked around the room, his eyes stopping briefly on each person. When he saw me, he walked over and sat down across from me. "You saw something today, didn't you?" he asked quietly, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I hesitated, then nodded. "Aisle 12. How did you know I asked?" Jack took a sip of his coffee. "Only certain people can see the tall man. Most walk right by, never knowing he's there." I felt a strange coldness come over me. What is it? Not an it. A he, Jack said. He looked at his watch. "That's why you're on the special rotation schedule." "What special rotation schedule?" But Jack was already standing up. "Break's over in 2 minutes. We'll talk more later." He walked away before I could ask more questions, leaving me confused and worried. The idea that most people couldn't see what I'd seen should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It made me feel alone, singled out somehow. The rest of the day was pretty normal. I kept expecting to turn a corner and see the tall figure again, but there was nothing weird, just regular warehouse work, regular coworkers. But now I noticed how some employees moved differently than others, more cautiously, more aware. Like me. I thought I was becoming one of them. As I drove home, I thought about what Jack had said. Only certain people could see the tall man. Why? Me. And what was this special rotation he'd mentioned? I checked my rearview mirror more times than necessary all the way home, half expecting to see a too tall shadow in the back seat. I spent Saturday morning in my apartment bent over my laptop with a cold cup of coffee next to me. What I'd seen at the warehouse, that super tall shape in aisle 12 and Emily hiding in terror, kept stuck in my head. After 2 bad nights of sleep, I decided to look into it more. The search bar waited for me to type something. I typed Newark warehouse unusual occurrences. Nothing useful came up, just news about regular accidents and union disputes at various industrial sites. I tried different combinations: strange rules, warehouse New Jersey tall figures, Newark storage facility haunted warehouses. Each search led to dead ends or ghost hunting websites with no real information. Then I tried something more specific: Newark warehouse building history. This gave better results. I found records showing the building had been built in 1978, pretty new compared to other industrial buildings in the area. But what caught my attention was its location. The record showed the warehouse was built on land where Eastwood Mental Institution used to be, which had run from 1924 until 1976. I clicked on a link to an old newspaper article with a grainy black and white photo of a harsh-looking brick building with barred windows. The headline read, "Tragedy at Eastwood, 37 dead in asylum fire." The article explained how a fire had broken out in the east wing of the institution late one night in October 1976. Most staff and patients had escaped, but 37 patients in the locked ward had been trapped. By the time firefighters got inside, it was too late. I read through several more articles about the fire. Some mentioned rumors of neglect and questionable treatment practices at Eastwood. One report from 1977 suggested that experimental therapies had been done in the basement levels, though officials denied these claims. After the fire, the remaining building had been torn down and the land sat empty for nearly 2 years, before being sold to a development company that built the warehouse. My search then took another turn when I typed Newark warehouse employee disappearances. The results made my stomach drop. Over the past 40 years, there had been at least 6 cases of employees who had simply vanished. Police reports labeled most as people who left by choice, people who had quit without notice or moved away suddenly. But family members often disagreed with these conclusions, insisting their loved ones would never leave their lives without explanation. I found a local news article from 2011 about a woman named Maria Vasquez who had worked at the warehouse for 3 months before disappearing. Her car was found in the employee parking lot, but she was never located. The case remained unsolved. Another article from 2004 mentioned an employee named Derek Chen who had quit suddenly after working the night shift. According to his roommate, Chen had been acting strangely in the weeks before his disappearance, complaining about voices at work and becoming increasingly paranoid. I sat back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. The connections were too strong to be random. A mental institution with rumors of experimental treatments burns down, killing dozens of patients. Years later, a warehouse built on the same site has strange rules about voices, figures, and shadows, and employees who vanish without explanation. I closed my laptop and got ready for bed. But sleep was rough, filled with dreams of tall shadows moving through endless aisles. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a steady drizzle that matched my mood. I walked into the warehouse with new awareness, noticing how employees naturally avoided certain areas. The normal buzz of a workplace, the small talk, the complaints about Monday, the coffee runs, existed alongside unspoken boundaries that everyone followed. During lunch, I spotted Emily sitting alone in the corner of the break room. She looked tired. Dark circles under her eyes making her face look worn out. I grabbed my sandwich and walked over. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. She glanced up, hesitated, then nodded. "Free country." I sat across from her, unwrapping my sandwich slowly. "Been here long?" 8 months. She replied automatically, the same answer she'd given when we first met. "Do you like it?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "It pays the bills." She took a small bite of her salad. I lowered my voice. "Emily, I need to ask you something about the rules." Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully. "What about them?" "I did some research this weekend. About this place. About people who've worked here and disappeared." Emily's eyes darted around the room, checking who might be listening. Most employees were engaged in their own conversations or looking at their phones. "Not here," she whispered. "Meet me by the loading dock at the end of lunch." We finished eating in silence. When the lunch period ended, I headed to the loading dock. Emily was already there, standing in a corner, away from the other workers who were returning from break. "You shouldn't be asking questions," she said when I approached. "Not if you want to keep working here." "I've seen things, Emily. The tall figure in aisle 12. I saw you hiding the other day when you called in sick. What's going on here?" She crossed her arms tightly across her chest. "Look, we all see different things. That's how it works. What I see might not be what you see. But the rules, they're about whatever's in this building, aren't they? The voices, the figures." Emily looked down for a bit, then back at me. "People who break the rules don't last long here. I've seen it happen." "Like who, Carlos?" she said quietly. "He worked in shipping for about a year. One night he was finishing up some paperwork after hours. He heard someone call his name from the storage area. "Rule 10, I said. If you hear your name called after hours, do not respond and leave immediately." Emily nodded. He answered. Went to check who was calling him. The next morning they found his ID badge by the loading dock. Nothing else. That gave me the creeps. What happened to him? Nobody knows. The official story was that he quit without notice, but his car was still in the parking lot for 3 days before someone drove it away. She swallowed hard. Then there was Diane. She used the restroom during the 10:30 break. What happened? She never came out. When security checked, the bathroom was empty, but her purse was still on the sink counter. I thought about Rule 4. All personnel must exit the warehouse floor during the 10:30 a.m. and 3:15 p.m. breaks. No exceptions. Why those specific times, I asked. Emily shook her head. I don't know, but I've worked here long enough to know the rules keep us alive. She checked her watch. Break's over. We should get back. As we walked back to our stations, Emily grabbed my arm. Listen, Tom, whatever you found out this weekend, whatever you're thinking about doing, be careful. This place. She trailed off, then added, just follow the rules. The afternoon shift dragged on. I kept thinking about what Emily had told me, connecting it with my weekend research. The patients who had died in the fire at Eastwood, the experimental treatments, the voices and figures in the warehouse. Around 2:30, I was assigned to inventory a section in the north wing that hardly anyone ever visited. The shelves here had specialty items that weren't ordered often, custom equipment parts and discontinued products. Dust had settled on many of the boxes, suggesting they hadn't been moved in months. As I looked over items in the back corner, I noticed something odd about the wall. A section of it didn't quite match the surrounding concrete. The color was slightly different, and there was a thin seam running around what looked like it could be a door. I glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then pressed against different spots on the wall. Nothing happened. Then I noticed a small metal plate at floor level that looked like an electrical outlet cover. When I pushed it, I heard a soft click, and a section of the wall swung inward slightly. My pulse racing, I pulled the hidden door open wider and looked inside. It was a small office, maybe 10 by 12 feet, with no windows. The air smelled musty and unused. A metal desk sat against one wall, filing cabinets against another. A single bulb hung from the ceiling connected to a pull chain. I stepped inside and pulled the chain. Yellow light filled the room, showing dust covering everything. This place hadn't been used in years. The filing cabinets contained personnel records dating back to the early 1980s. I flipped through them, quickly noting names and dates. Many files had red stamps marking employees as terminated or resigned. A few had different notations transferred or simply missing. On the desk was a leather-bound book. I opened it carefully and found a handwritten journal. The name Raymond Cooper Security 1985 to 1992 was written on the inside cover. I started reading entries at random. March 15th, 1986. Second incident in the East Wing. Management insists we stick to the official explanation, gas leak, but we all know better. Added Rule 15 to the personal list. Never remain in one place for more than 30 minutes during the night shift. July 7th, 1988. The woman in white appeared in the third-floor bathroom mirror again. Johnson saw her this time. He quit the next day. Rule 19. Never look directly into bathroom mirrors after 6 p.m., November 2nd, 1990. Storage room incident 3 missing. Official report will say they quit. God help us. Adding Rule 23, storage room in Section C remains locked at all times. The journal contained dozens of entries, each documenting strange occurrences and adding new rules. Raymond had apparently kept his own expanded list beyond the official 10 rules given to employees. I pulled out my phone and quickly took photos of several pages, including the entries about the woman in white and the storage room incident. I wanted to read the entire journal, but I'd already been gone too long. Someone might come looking for me. I placed the journal back exactly as I'd found it and shut off the light. As I pulled the hidden door closed, I heard footsteps approaching. I quickly moved to the nearest shelf and pretended to be checking inventory. Jack came around the corner just as I finished adjusting a box on the shelf. He stopped looking at me and then at the wall behind me where the hidden door was. "Finding everything okay, Tom?" he asked. His tone was casual, but his expression was unreadable. "Yeah, just double-checking these part numbers," I said, holding up my inventory scanner. "The system showed some discrepancies." Jack nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Interesting area to find discrepancies. I go where the system sends me," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Jack paused, then added, "You know, Tom, curiosity is a good quality in an employee. Shows initiative, but in a place like this, it's also important to know when to leave things alone." The warning was clear, though. His tone stayed friendly. "Just doing my job," I replied. Jack stared at me for what felt like minutes. "Well, if you need any clarification about your duties, my door is always open." As he turned to leave, he added, "By the way, the 3:15 break is in 10 minutes. Don't lose track of time back here." I watched him walk away. He knew. Somehow he knew I'd found the hidden office. But rather than getting angry, he'd almost seemed expectant, like he'd been waiting for me to discover it. I looked back at the wall, hiding the secret door. I couldn't stop thinking about Raymond Cooper's journal entries, Emily's stories, and everything I'd researched. This warehouse had something weird going on beyond just strange rules and tall figures and dark corners, and Jack Peterson was in on it. The alarm for the 3:15 break went off, and I headed for the break room, my phone feeling heavy in my pocket with all the photos I'd taken. I needed to read those journal entries more carefully. I needed to understand what I'd gotten myself into. I spent Monday night poring over the photos I'd taken of Raymond Cooper's journal. Each entry described something worse than the last. Cooper had documented not just strange occurrences but actual deaths employees who'd broken rules and never been seen again. The official stories always claimed they'd quit, moved away, or simply stopped showing up. But Cooper knew better. He'd seen what happened to them. One entry from August 1989 stuck with me. The break times were established after the Peterson incident. The entities become more active at these hours, as if feeding on the energy of the building. All personnel must exit the floor during these periods. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured the tall figure from aisle 12. According to Cooper's journal, there wasn't just one of them. There were many, each trapped in its own section of the warehouse, and they weren't alone. Other things lurked in the shadows, things that whispered names and copied voices they'd heard before. Tuesday morning arrived with gray skies and a steady rain. I pulled into the parking lot 15 minutes early, hoping to talk to Emily before my shift started. But as I approached the employee entrance, I saw Jack standing there with a young guy I didn't recognize. The new employee was tall and lanky with sandy blonde hair, probably mid-20s. He looked way too relaxed, like someone who still thought this was just a normal job. "Tom, good timing," Jack said when he spotted me. "This is Michael Bailey. He's starting today. Michael, this is Tom Wright. He's been with us for about 2 weeks now." "Hey, what's up?" Michael extended his hand with an easy smile. I shook it, noticing how relaxed he seemed. I'd probably looked the same on my first day before I knew what was really happening in this place. "Mike's fine," he added. "No one calls me Michael except my mom when she's mad." "Nice to meet you," I said. "You're starting an inventory," Jack answered. "I thought you could show him around after orientation. Since you're still relatively new yourself, the tour route should be fresh in your mind." I nodded, not particularly wanting the responsibility, but not seeing a way to refuse. "Perfect," Jack said. "Let's get the paperwork started then. Tom, we'll meet you in the break room in about 30 minutes. As they walked toward Jack's office, I went to my locker to put away my lunch. Emily was already there, arranging items in her locker. "New guy starting today," I said quietly. Emily glanced toward the hallway where Jack and Michael had disappeared. "Hope he's a rule follower. He seems pretty casual, confident type." She closed her locker with a soft click. "Those are the ones who don't last." I wanted to tell her about Cooper's journal, about the entries I'd read, but other employees were coming in now. Instead, I asked, "Can we talk later? I found something yesterday." Emily paused, her eyes moving to the other workers nearby. Loading dock, lunch break. 30 minutes later, I met Jack and Michael in the break room as requested. Jack handed me a clipboard with orientation materials and the warehouse floor plan. "I have a supplier meeting this morning," Jack explained. "Can you handle showing Mike around? Make sure you cover all the standard areas, especially the emergency exits and break schedule." "Sure," I said, taking the clipboard. "Great. Mike Tom will get you up to speed. Remember those rules we discussed." Jack gave Michael a meaningful look before heading toward the administrative offices. As soon as Jack was out of earshot, Michael snorted. "Man, is he always so intense about the special rules?" "What do you mean?" I asked, though. I already had a sinking feeling. Michael pulled out the warehouse rules from his pocket. This whole haunted house routine. Never look at the tall figure in shadows. "Don't respond if you hear your name after hours," he laughed. "Your boss has a weird sense of humor." I stopped walking. "Those rules aren't a joke. Come on, man." Michael tucked the paper back into his pocket. "I've worked in 3 different warehouses. They all have their stupid hazing rituals for the new guys. Some places make you search for a left-handed wrench or striped paint. Here they try to convince you the place is haunted." "It's not hazing," I said firmly. "People have disappeared here." "Right, eaten by the boogeyman in aisle 7. Michael's smile never faltered. "What's next on the tour?" "The chair that spins by itself. The ghost in the bathroom." I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake some sense into him. Instead, I took a deep breath. Let me show you the shipping department. Throughout the morning, I tried multiple times to tell Michael why the rules mattered. Each time he just rolled his eyes or made jokes. When I mentioned the mandatory break times, he laughed. So we all have to hide in the break room because the ghost clock strikes 10:30. He shook his head. No warehouse is this strict about break times. It's ridiculous. It's not about being strict, I said. It's about safety. Safety from what bad feng shui. Michael checked his watch. It's almost break time now. Guess we better run before the boogeyman gets us. The 10:30 alarm sounded and employees began making their way to the break room. Michael watched with amusement as workers wrapped up tasks mid-process and headed out. Wow, they've really got everyone buying into this, he said. Impressive commitment to the bit. To my relief, Michael followed us to the break room, even though he was skeptical, but he spent the 15 minutes making jokes about ghosts and asking others if they'd seen any tall shadow men lately. Most employees ignored him or changed the subject. I could tell everyone was uncomfortable, but Michael didn't seem to notice or care. After break, I left Michael with Louise from shipping, who was assigned to train him on procedures. I had my own work to catch up on, and frankly, I needed a break from Michael's constant dismissals. At lunch, I met Emily at the loading dock as planned. I showed her the photos of Cooper's journal entries. I found a hidden office yesterday, I explained. This journal belonged to a security guard who worked here in the 80s and 90s. He documented everything, all the incidents, all the disappearances. Emily scrolled through the photos on my phone, her face growing paler with each swipe. Jesus, she whispered. I knew it was bad, but this... Cooper added his own rules beyond the official 10, I said. There are at least 30 in his personal list. Rules about mirrors, about certain storage rooms, about staying in one place too long during night shifts. Emily handed the phone back, her hand trembling slightly. Where's this hidden office north wing behind a false wall? Jack caught me leaving it yesterday, and he didn't fire you on the spot, no. He was weird about it, almost like he was expecting me to find it. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, even with the warm air. I should have quit months ago after what happened to Carlos. Why didn't you? She was quiet for a moment. I tried, twice. First time my car wouldn't start for 3 days. Second time my mother had a stroke the morning I was going to hand in my notice. She looked at me. It was like something didn't want me to leave. I felt really uneasy. Cooper's journal mentioned something similar employees who tried to quit experiencing unfortunate accidents until they returned. What about the new guy Emily asked, changing the subject? The one you were showing around this morning, Michael. He thinks the rules are a joke, some kind of hazing ritual. Emily shook her head. That's how it starts. They laugh, they break a rule, they disappear. Then we get told they quit without notice. I tried to warn him. Some people can't be warned, Emily said. They have to see for themselves. By then, it's usually too late. The afternoon dragged on. I checked the shipping area twice and saw Michael working with Louise, still looking completely unconcerned. At one point, I overheard him joking about the haunted warehouse rules to a delivery driver who just looked confused. Around 2:45, I passed Michael restocking shipping supplies. Breaks at 3:15, I reminded him. Make sure you're in the break room. Yes, sir, Ghost Captain, he said with a mock salute. Wouldn't want the shadow people to get me. I clenched my jaw. This isn't a joke, Mike, he corrected. And yeah, it kind of is. Look, I get it. You're in on it keeping up the act for the new guy, but I'm not falling for it. People have died here, I said, lowering my voice. Right, and their ghosts haunt the bathroom mirrors after 600 p.m. He smirked. I read fantasy novels too, man. This is just a warehouse with weird managers and gullible employees. I gave up. You can't force someone to believe what they don't want to see. Besides, Michael couldn't see what I had seen. Jack had said only certain people could see the tall man. Maybe Michael was lucky enough to not see any of it. At 3:10, employees started finishing up their work. The warehouse felt different right before break time. Everyone seemed on edge. It wasn't just people wanting their break, it was fear. I walked to the break room, checking the clock nervously. Michael was nowhere to be seen. The 3:15 alarm went off, and the last few workers rushed in. Has anyone seen Michael? I asked Louise, who had just entered. Louise shrugged. He said he needed to finish labeling some packages. I told him to hurry, but He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. He's still out there. I moved to the break room door, which had a small window looking out onto the warehouse floor. Through it, I could see Michael casually walking between aisles, clipboard in hand, apparently checking inventory tags. He's going to get himself killed, I muttered. Emily appeared beside me, peering through the window. Is that the new guy out there alone? I nodded. He thinks the rules are a joke. Should we tell Jack's not here? Supplier meeting? Remember, Michael kept walking down the aisles all alone on the warehouse floor. He looked at his watch and smiled, looking around at the empty space like he was enjoying breaking the rules. Then it happened. Every light in the warehouse went out at once. 1 second, the floor was lit up by hundreds of fluorescent tubes. The next, it was pitch black. The break room light stayed on, making a weird contrast between our lit room and the darkness outside. A single alarm went off, a deep horn that stopped after 3 seconds. Then, nothing. Rule 1 popped into my head. If the lights go out, leave the building right away. Don't use flashlights. But Michael was out there alone. In the darkness, something moved. At first, I thought I was seeing things. Then I saw them clearly, darker spots in the blackness moving in a strange way. Not just one tall shape, but many. They came from different parts of the warehouse, sliding instead of walking. Michael just stood there, holding his clipboard against his chest. From the break room, I could see his face change from confused to scared as he spotted the moving shadows. What the fuck? I heard him say, his voice carrying in the silence. The shadows circled him, getting taller and clearer. There were at least 5 of them, each about 7 or 8 feet tall, with arms and legs that looked too long and skinny. They didn't have actual faces, just darker spots where eyes and mouths should have been. Hello, Michael called out, his voice higher now. Is this part of the joke? Because it's not funny. The figures kept circling, getting closer each time around. Michael tried to back away, but they had him surrounded. Tom. He called, panic rising in his voice. Louise, anyone Rule 9 kept playing in my head. Never enter the warehouse floor during a power outage. No matter what you see or hear, remain outside. Emily gripped my arm. Don't even think about it, she whispered. Michael's face had gone white. He could see them now, really see them. Whatever had kept him from seeing these things before was gone. He was seeing the truth of the warehouse for the first time. One of the figures reached out with an impossibly long arm. It moved like water flowing rather than extending. Michael tried to slap it away. Get off! What is this? His voice cracked with terror. The figure's dark arm touched Michael's shoulder. He screamed so loud and scared it filled the whole building. The clipboard fell to the concrete floor as Michael stumbled backward. The emergency lights kicked on dim red bulbs that didn't help much. In that red light, I saw the figures crowd around Michael. His scream stopped suddenly. I couldn't stand it anymore. I ignored the rules, even with Emily pulling at my arm. I pushed open the break room door and ran onto the warehouse floor. Michael, I shouted. The emergency lights blinked and the warehouse went dark for several seconds. When they came back on, the tall figures were gone. So was Michael. All that was left was his clipboard on the concrete floor. Jack called an emergency meeting 30 minutes later. By then, the main lights had been fixed and a maintenance team had shown up to fix the circuit breaker issue. But everyone knew it wasn't just an electrical problem. We all met in the conference room, the entire day shift, standing in awkward silence. Jack came in last, his face blank. I'm sure you're all aware of the incident this afternoon. He began, his voice calm and professional. I want to assure everyone that the power failure has been addressed and there's no cause for concern. No one spoke. No one looked at each other. As for Michael Bailey, Jack continued, he has decided the position wasn't suitable for him and will not be returning. Jack looked at me from across the room. Our eyes locked. The message was clear. This is what happens when the rules are broken. We'll continue operations as normal tomorrow, Jack concluded. Remember, your safety is our primary concern. That's why we have guidelines in place. The meeting ended and everyone walked out quietly. No one mentioned Michael's scream or how he disappeared. It was like they'd already accepted the official story and forgotten what really happened. I stayed back waiting until I was alone with Jack. He didn't quit, I said flatly. Jack straightened a stack of papers on the conference table. Tom. I understand this is difficult to process, but the rules exist for a reason. He was taken by those things. I saw it happen. What you saw Jack said carefully was a new employee who chose not to follow clearly stated protocols. The consequences of that choice are unfortunate, but not unexpected. And now what? We just pretend he never existed. File a report saying he quit. Jack looked at me. His face softened a bit. What would you have me do? Tell everyone the truth that things we can't understand took one of their coworkers because he broke a rule that these beings have been here for decades, taking people who don't respect the boundaries I had? No answer. Go home, Tom, Jack said. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a normal day, just like always. On my way out, I took a detour past where Michael had been standing. The clipboard had been removed, but in the harsh fluorescent light, I noticed something else, a small dark stain on the concrete floor. I crouched down for a closer look. Blood. Not much, just a few drops, but enough to confirm that whatever had happened to Michael wasn't as simple as quitting his job. As I stood up, I caught Jack watching me from the end of the aisle. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. We both knew what had happened to Michael Bailey, and we both knew the rules would continue to be enforced not by management, but by whatever controlled this warehouse. After what happened to Michael, I couldn't just go back to normal. I kept seeing his face in that moment when he finally understood, when the truth about the warehouse revealed itself to him just before he vanished. The official story was that he'd quit, but I knew better. We all did, even if no one talked about it. I needed answers, not more mysteries. The next morning I called in sick. Jack seemed to accept my excuse without question, though something in his tone suggested he knew I wasn't actually ill. I spent the day going through Raymond Cooper's journal photos again, looking for anything I might have missed. One name kept showing up in Cooper's later entries, Sarah Mitchell. According to the journal, she had been a logistics coordinator from 1989 to 1991. Cooper wrote about her as one of the few employees who understood what we're really dealing with. More importantly, she had survived. Cooper's final entry mentioned that she had quit after the incident in the East Wing and actually managed to leave. One of the rare employees who got away from the warehouse. If she was still alive, I needed to find her. It took most of the day, but putting together Cooper's details with social media searches and public records finally gave me something useful. A Sarah Mitchell of the right age lived in Hoboken, only about 20 minutes from the warehouse. The property records lined up with the timeline. She'd bought a small house there in 1992, a year after leaving her job. I thought about calling first, but decided against it. This wasn't a conversation to have over the phone, and I worried she might hang up if I mentioned the warehouse. Instead, I drove to Hoboken after dinner, finding her address in a quiet neighborhood of modest homes. The house was small but well kept with neatly trimmed hedges and potted plants on the porch. I sat in my car for several minutes practicing what to say. How do you introduce yourself to someone you've never met and ask them about supernatural entities at your workplace? Finally, I walked up to the door and rang the bell. After a long pause, I heard movement inside. The door opened a few inches, held by a security chain. A woman with graying hair cut in a bob looked out at me. Yes. Can I help you? Her voice was cautious, guarded. Mitchell, Sarah? Mitchell, I asked. Who's asking? Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. My name is Tom Wright. I work at the Newark warehouse. I found your name in Raymond Cooper's journal. The color drained from her face. For a moment I thought she might slam the door. Instead, she asked Raymond's journal. You've read parts of it. I found it in a hidden office. She stared at me for several long seconds. What section do you work in inventory? East Wing, mostly. Have you seen them? She asked. I didn't need to ask what she meant. Yes, the tall figures. And I was there when they took someone. Sarah closed the door. I thought that was it. She wasn't going to talk to me. Then I heard the chain sliding and the door reopened fully. Not here, she said. There's a diner 3 blocks down on Washington Street. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Before I could respond, she closed the door again. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. I chose a booth in the back away from the few other customers. Sarah arrived 15 minutes later, looking around carefully before sliding into the seat across from me. She ordered coffee when the waitress came by, while I asked for water. I never thought I'd hear that name again, she said once the waitress left. Raymond Cooper. You knew him well. He was the only one who took my concerns seriously. She pulled a tissue from her purse and twisted it between her fingers. Everyone else thought I was being paranoid even after Carlos disappeared. I straightened up. Carlos Emily mentioned someone by that name. There have probably been multiple Carloses over the years, Sarah said, her mouth twisting into a humorless smile. That place has a pattern. The waitress came back with our drinks. Sarah waited until she walked away before continuing. Why are you here, Tom? What do you want from me? The truth about the warehouse, about what happened to Michael Bailey 2 days ago, about why there are rules against looking at tall figures or responding to voices after hours. Sarah took a sip of her coffee, studying me over the rim of the cup. And if I tell you what then, you'll go back to work tomorrow like nothing happened. I don't know, I admitted. I just need to understand what I'm dealing with. She set her cup down with a sharp click. First, I need a promise from you. If I tell you what I know, you have to quit that job immediately. No 2 weeks notice, no finishing projects. You walk away and never go back. I can't just... You can and you will. Her voice was steel. Otherwise, this conversation ends now, and you can figure it out yourself like the rest of us did. I thought about my financial situation. I'd only been employed for a few weeks after months of unemployment. Finding another job wouldn't be easy. But then I remembered Michael's face as those tall guys surrounded him. I promise, I said. Sarah studied me for a moment longer, then nodded. The warehouse wasn't always a warehouse. You know that much, right? It was built on the site of Eastwood Mental Institution after it burned down in 1976. Did you know what they did at Eastwood? She asked. I shook my head. Officially, it was a standard psychiatric hospital, but the basement levels housed something else entirely. The directors called it experimental therapy. The staff called it the program. Patients who didn't respond to conventional treatments were sent downstairs. What kind of experiments? Sarah wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. They started with sensory deprivation, then hypnotic regression. Eventually, they moved on to electromagnetic stimulation of the brain. Experimental drugs even induced comas. They believed they could access parts of the human mind that normal treatments couldn't reach. That sounds like torture, not therapy, I said. It was. And it changed the patients, but not in the ways the doctors expected. Sarah lowered her voice. Have you ever heard of thought forms? Entities created by concentrated belief or emotion, like imaginary friends. More like manifestations. The experiments opened doorways in the patient's minds. Things came through. Or maybe the patient's consciousness went elsewhere and brought something back. No one knows for sure. But suddenly, the patients who underwent these treatments started exhibiting abilities. They could move objects without touching them. They knew things they couldn't possibly know. Some could cause physical effects in others. Pain, hallucinations, even physical wounds. I thought of the tall figures I'd seen, the weird way they moved the tall figures in the shadows. Sarah nodded. Former patients. Their physical bodies are gone, but something of them remains. Something not quite human anymore. And the voices, the crying that we're supposed to ignore, those who died in the fire. 37 patients, most from the secure ward where the experiments took place. The fire started in the East Winger section. I got the creeps. So when the warehouse was built, they built it right on top of the old foundation. They didn't even clear all the debris, just poured concrete over the ruins and started fresh. Sarah leaned forward, but the entities didn't go away. They were bound to that site, to the memory of what happened to them. When construction crews reported strange occurrences, the owners brought in specialists. What kind of specialists? Various kinds. Some with scientific backgrounds, others more esoteric. They determined that moving the entities was impossible. The only option was containment. The waitress approached to refill Sarah's coffee. We sat in silence until she left. The rules aren't safety guidelines. Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. They're containment protocols. Each one exists because someone died. The break times at 10:30 and 3:15. Those are when the entities are most active. Everyone clears the floor because that's when the boundaries are thinnest. I thought about Jack's weird comments, how he'd called the tall man a he instead of an it. And Jack, what does he do in all this? Sarah looked upset. Peterson is a keeper. There's always one at the site. They do rituals that keep those things from getting out. The last keeper was there when I worked at the warehouse, Diana Reeves. She trained Jack before she died. What do you mean, her time ended? Keepers don't retire, Tom. The role takes a toll. Eventually, they have to find a successor or the containment fails. I remembered what Jack had said about certain people being able to see the tall man, and only certain people can be keepers, those who can perceive the entities clearly. Not everyone can, you know. Some employees work there for years and never see anything unusual. Others, like you and me, see them from the beginning. Sarah reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. That's why you need to quit, now, before Jack realizes what you are. What I am, a potential successor. Her grip tightened. I was one too. That's why I had to leave before Diana could choose me. I made myself forget what I'd seen. And eventually, the connection weakened enough for me to break away completely. I pulled my hand back. You're saying Jack might try to make me the next keeper? Not might. Will if he hasn't already started grooming you for it. Sarah's eyes held mine. The entities are always testing the boundaries, looking for ways out. If they escape that building, what would happen I don't know exactly, and I don't want to find out. But based on what I saw during containment breaches, it wouldn't be limited to the warehouse. These things can affect minds, manipulate perceptions, cause physical harm. Imagine that loose in a city. I tried to process everything she'd told me. Mental patients subjected to experimental treatments, entities from beyond normal reality, a warehouse built as a prison for them, rules written in blood. It sounded insane. But after what I'd seen, I couldn't dismiss it. Remember your promise, Sarah said as we prepared to leave? Quit tomorrow. Walk away from that place while you still can. I will, I assured her. As I drove home, Sarah's warnings kept playing in my head. I thought about how Jack had been acting lately. He seemed almost happy when he caught me leaving that hidden office, and the way he watched me after Michael disappeared was weird. Was he sizing me up to take Michael's place? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those tall figures surrounding Michael. I heard his last scream before he was gone. The next morning, I got to the warehouse with my resignation already typed up on my phone. I was going to tell Jack to his face, give back my keycard and just walk out. But Jack wasn't in his office. The receptionist said he'd come in early, but nobody had seen him for about an hour. I just went through the motions with my morning work, checking the time and waiting for a chance to find Jack and quit. The warehouse felt different now that I knew what it really was, not just a building, but a place that kept things locked up that shouldn't exist in our world. At 10:15 minutes before our first break, I headed to the loading dock to check on a shipment. It was weirdly quiet. The big rolling door was closed and nobody else was around. As I turned to leave, I noticed something strange about the wall next to the dock controls. A thin line going from floor to ceiling that didn't match the rest of the concrete. I ran my hand along the line, feeling a bit of air coming through. There was a door here, hidden right in plain sight. I pushed on different parts of the wall, remembering how I found that hidden office. Near the bottom, my fingers found a small latch that looked like just another crack in the concrete. When I pulled it, part of the wall swung open easily. Behind the door was a narrow staircase going down. The walls were bare concrete with plain bulbs giving off weak light. I knew I should close the door and leave. I promised Sarah I would quit, not dig deeper into the warehouse's secrets, but something pulled me forward. Maybe curiosity, or something else. The stairs went down about 30 feet before opening into a big basement room. The room was huge with a high ceiling held up by thick concrete columns. The floor was smooth cement with strange patterns carved into it, forming circles inside circles. Jack was standing in the middle of these circles. He had on his normal work clothes, but he was standing differently, back straight, arms out, head tilted up. Around him, dozens of candles made a circle of light. Jack was speaking in some language I didn't know, his voice going up and down in a rhythm that hurt my ears. The room had this feeling like right before lightning hits. The patterns on the floor gave off a faint glow, pulsing with Jack's words. Along the walls, shadows were moving on their own, stretching and shrinking like they were alive and testing how far they could go. I should have left right away, but I just stood there frozen, watching Jack do whatever ritual this was. Then he suddenly stopped talking and turned to look at me. I thought he'd be mad that I was there, but his face showed something completely different relief. "Tom," he said, his voice soft, "I've been waiting for someone like you, someone who can see them. I was just looking for you," I stammered. "I didn't mean to. You found the door because you were meant to." Jack stepped out of the innermost circle, careful not to disturb the pattern of candles. The shadows on the walls reacted to his movement, stretching toward him before receding. "The warehouse led you here. The warehouse led me. What does that mean?" "This building has awareness, Tom. Not consciousness as we understand it, but something similar. It knows who enters its walls. It tests them. It shows itself to those who can potentially serve as keepers." I backed toward the stairs. "I came to quit, Jack. I know what this place really is. I know about Eastwood, about the experiments, about the entities." Jack nodded slowly. "Sarah Mitchell, you found her. She told you everything. Not everything. She couldn't have." Jack looked tired with dark circles under his eyes and a pallor to his skin that hadn't been there the day before. "She never completed her training. She never became a keeper. There are things only we can know. I'm not interested in knowing more. I promised Sarah I'd quit, and that's what I'm doing. You can't." Jack's voice was gentle but firm. "Not now. The containment is getting weaker. I can't hold them back alone anymore." He gestured to the ritual space behind him. "This used to be enough, but not anymore. They're growing stronger, more aware. I need a successor. Find someone else. Don't you understand?" "There is no one else. Not here. Not now." Jack took a step toward me. "Why do you think I hired you?" "Tom, your resume wasn't exceptional. Your interview was average at best. But I sensed something in you. The potential. The ability to perceive what others can't." I remembered my first day. How Jack's mood had changed when he gave me the rules. How he'd looked at my face checking for a reaction. "You knew from the beginning," I suspected. "Then you saw the tall man in aisle 12 and I was certain." Jack looked over his shoulder at the chalk circles. "The entities are becoming more aggressive. You saw what happened to Michael. That was just the beginning. What happens if the containment fails completely?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Chaos. Death. The entities don't understand our world or its rules. They experience time and space differently. Their mere presence warps reality around them." Jack closed his eyes briefly. "I've been keeper for 15 years. Diana before me lasted 12. The role demands sacrifice, but it's necessary." A thought occurred to me. If these entities are so dangerous, why not just demolish the building? Start over somewhere else. You think that wasn't considered? Jack shook his head. "After the fire, before the warehouse was built, they tried to cleanse the site. Religious leaders, paranormal researchers, even government specialists. Nothing worked. The entities were bound to this location so deeply that destroying the physical structure would only release them without the containment measures we've established." One of the shadows along the wall stretched toward us, looking like a tall, thin human with impossibly long arms. Jack looked at it, muttered something under his breath, and the shadow moved back. "The boundaries are weakening by the day," he said. "I need someone to help me maintain them. Someone who will eventually take my place when I can no longer serve." Jack's eyes met mine. "I need you, Tom. We need you." I thought about Sarah's warning, about my promise to her, about the normal life I'd have if I walked away now. But I also thought about what might happen if the creatures escaped, if the things that took Michael were free to move beyond these walls. "I just stock inventory," I said weakly. "I'm not equipped for this." "Neither was I when Diana chose me," Jack replied. "The role changes you, prepares you." He held out his hand. "I'm not asking you to decide this minute, just to stay to learn to understand what's at stake." The shadows on the walls moved again, looking like faces for a few seconds. Weird, pained expressions that quickly went back to just being darkness. I felt stressed about what to do next. I could stay and maybe get stuck in this place with all its scary stuff, or I could go and worry about the containment breaking without someone to take over. "What exactly would helping you entail?" I asked, still not committing. Jack's shoulders relaxed slightly. "For now, just knowledge. I'll teach you the history, the rituals, the true nature of what we're containing. Later, you'd participate in the maintenance of the boundaries." He pointed to the chalk circles. "This is just one of several anchors throughout the building. Each must be regularly reinforced. I took a deep breath. I need time to think about this. Of course. But not too long. Jack looked at the ritual space once more. The 10:30 boundary maintenance is due to begin soon. You should return upstairs before then. As I turned to leave, Jack added, Tom, whatever you decide, do not tell the other employees what you've seen here. Knowledge. 2 nights after my encounter with Jack in the basement, I pulled into the warehouse parking lot for my evening shift. Something felt off right away. The building was dark against the night sky, not a single light on in any window. The usual outside lights were off with only the dim parking lot lights showing anything. I checked my watch, 8:17 p.m. I wasn't early or late. The warehouse should have been busy with the evening shift by now. As I got out of my car, Jack came out from the shadows near the employee entrance. He stood there waiting, his face looking super pale in the weak parking lot lights. He looked stiff and nervous, instead of his usual confident self. It's happening, he said as I approached. No greeting, no explanation, just those 2 words that sent a chill through me. What's happening, I asked, though I already knew the answer. The containment. It's failing faster than I anticipated. Jack pulled a keycard from his pocket. We need to go inside. I looked at the dark building, remembering Rule 9, never enter the warehouse floor during a power outage. The power's out. This isn't a regular outage. Jack swiped his card at the reader. The door clicked open despite the lack of electricity. They're testing the boundaries. Come with me now. Every instinct told me to get back in my car and drive away to keep the promise I'd made to Sarah Mitchell. But I followed Jack into the darkness, letting the heavy door swing shut behind us. Inside, the temperature dropped at least 20 degrees. My breath clouded in front of my face as Jack switched on a flashlight, breaking another of the warehouse rules. The light showed the empty reception area as we walked in. The night shift, I asked. I sent everyone home when it started. Jack moved toward the hallway leading to the warehouse floor, said it was an electrical issue that needed repair. As we entered the main warehouse, the flashlight beam caught something moving across the wall to our right. A shadow moving sideways even though nothing was there to make it. Another shadow moved across the floor, went through a support column and kept going on the other side. They're becoming more active, Jack said, his voice tight, more independent. I watched the shadows move around, testing boundaries, stretching into shapes that looked almost like people before fading away. What changed? You said this was happening faster than you expected. Jack pointed his flashlight toward aisle 12 where I'd first seen the tall figure. It's been building for months, years really. But there was a surge tonight. He looked at me. I think they sense a potential change. A new keeper. We walked through the warehouse floor, Jack's flashlight lighting our way. I noticed it got colder as we passed certain areas. Near the east wing, my ears popped like the air pressure had suddenly changed. A soft whispering sound seemed to follow us, too quiet to make out any words. Jack led me to the hidden door by the loading dock. It opened when he touched it, showing the stairs going down into the dark. The ritual space looks different, Jack warned as we started down the stairs. It adapts to what's needed. The basement looked different since I'd last seen it. The single ritual circle had grown into 3 rings that covered most of the floor. Candles burned at certain points along each circle, making the room even colder than it already was. Strange symbols I didn't know were painted between the rings in what looked like red paint, or maybe something else. In the middle of the smallest circle was a stand I hadn't seen before. On it sat an old leather-bound book like Raymond Cooper's journal, but bigger and more beat up. This is the keeper's text, Jack said, gesturing to the book. It contains the history of this site, the nature of the entities, and the rituals needed to maintain the boundaries. Jack turned to face me directly. His eyes looked sunken, his skin pale in the candlelight. There's a final rule I haven't shared with you, the most important one. He took a deep breath. When containment begins to fail, a new keeper must be chosen, or the entities will escape into the world. The shadows along the walls moved more violently at his words, like they were excited by what he said. I thought you were already training me as your successor, I said. Training, yes, but the actual transfer requires a specific moment when the barriers are thin enough for the connection to be established, but not so thin that everything breaks through. Jack gestured around us. That moment is now. I thought of my promise to Sarah, of the normal life I'd been trying to reclaim before taking this job. What exactly does becoming a keeper mean? Jack placed his hand on the very old book. It means You're tied to this place, to the things kept inside it. After we do the ritual, you can't leave the warehouse for more than 12 hours at a time. If you stay away longer, it starts to hurt and it gets worse the longer you're gone. Plus, the stuff inside gets harder to keep locked up. 12 hours, I stepped back. That's not a job, Jack. That's a prison sentence. Yes. His voice was quiet but firm. That's exactly what it is. A voluntary imprisonment to prevent something far worse. The whispers from the shadows grew louder, almost understandable now. The temperature dropped further, my fingers growing numb with cold. And if I refuse, I asked. Jack looked at the writhing shadows. Then the containment fails completely. The entities escape. And what happens next? He closed his eyes briefly. I've seen the records of other sites where containment failed. Oakville, Washington in 1994. Entire town affected by what they thought was mysterious black rain. Actually, an entity similar to those here but airborne. Hundreds hospitalized. Dozens never recovered mentally. He turned a page in the very old book. Pripyat, Ukraine. The official story was a nuclear accident, but the initial incident was containment failure at a facility similar to this one. The radiation was real, a side effect of the entities interacting with the physical world on that scale. Jack looked up at me. Toad 2001, an abandoned hospital that housed 3 entities from a project similar to Eastwood. Containment failed when the last keeper died without a successor. The entities escaped into a 10-block radius. Official reports called it mass hysteria, possibly caused by contaminated water. 47 people killed themselves within a week. 17 more committed violent acts against others with no prior history of aggression. I felt sick. You're saying these things could cause disasters that large, potentially worse. Jack's voice was steady. The Eastwood entities are more numerous and more powerful than most other containment sites. They've been here longer, feeding off each other's energy, growing in the darkness. The shadows look darker around us now, with shapes that kind of look like faces. I noticed that same tall, skinny figure I'd seen in aisle 12 standing by the far wall. It didn't move while it watched us talk. Why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Out of everyone who's worked here, why choose me? Because you can see them clearly. Because you understand the danger they pose. Because despite your fear, you came back after witnessing what happened to Michael. Jack stepped closer. And because they recognize you, too. They've tested you, observed you. The tall one in particular seems curious about you. I looked where Jack was looking to see the tall shadow figure like it knew we were watching. It moved its blank head a little. This has to be voluntary, Jack continued. The ritual doesn't work otherwise. The connection won't form properly unless you accept it willingly. I closed my eyes, trying to think through my options. I could walk away right now, get in my car, drive home, never return. But what would happen to the people in Newark if the containment failed? What bad things could happen if these things escaped into a city full of people? How long, I asked. How long would I be bound to this place until you find your own successor? It could be years, decades even. Jack's shoulders slumped slightly. Diana held the position for 12 years before finding me. I've been keeper for 15. And what happens to you if I accept, I'll be free of the connection, free to leave. Jack gave a tired smile. Though after so long, I'm not sure I remember how to live a normal life anymore. The whispers from the shadows got louder, more pushy. The tall person took a step toward us, moving smoothly. They're growing impatient, Jack warned. The decision needs to be made soon. I thought of Sarah Mitchell, who had gotten away from being picked as a keeper. She warned me to quit before it was too late. I promised her I would walk away, but that was before I knew what was really at stake, how dangerous it would be if the containment broke down. I thought of Emily, of Louise, of all the warehouse employees who had no idea what was under their feet, of the people living in the neighborhoods around the warehouse, of Michael, who died because he didn't believe. What do I need to do? I asked finally. Relief washed over Jack's face. Step into the innermost circle. Place your hands on the book. I'll perform the ritual that transfers the connection from me to you. I approached the chalk circles hesitantly. The candles blinked as I stepped over the outermost line, their flames bending away as if from a strong wind. The air got even colder within the circles, my breath clouding heavily in front of me. As I crossed the second line, the whispers suddenly stopped. The shadows along the walls went still, all of them seeming to watch intently. The tall figure had moved closer now, standing just at the edge of the ritual space. I paused at the edge of the innermost circle. This was my last chance to turn back to keep my promise to Sarah to have any semblance of a normal life. What exactly will I feel when the connection forms? I asked, stalling. Pain, initially, Jack said honestly. Then awareness. You'll sense each entity individually. Know where they are, what they're doing. Feel when they test the boundaries. The warehouse itself will become an extension of your consciousness in a way that's difficult to explain. I took a deep breath and stepped into the innermost circle. The very old book lay open on the pedestal before me, its pages covered in text I couldn't read and diagrams that hurt my eyes to look at directly. I placed my hands on the open pages as Jack had instructed. Jack began speaking in the same language I'd heard him use during my previous visit to the ritual space. The words made it hard to breathe. The candles around us flared higher, their light getting stronger without providing any warmth. The shadows began to move again more frantically now. They stretched toward the ritual circles, but couldn't cross the boundaries marked by the candles. The tall figure watched without moving, focusing on me. As Jack continued the ritual, I felt something change inside me, a pulling feeling in my chest. The pain started gradually, a dull ache that quickly got worse until it hurt all over my body. I gritted my teeth, fighting the urge to pull my hands away from the book. The pages beneath my fingers grew warm, then hot, though they didn't burn. Symbols from the text seemed to move, crawling up my wrists and disappearing beneath my skin. Jack's voice rose to a shout as he completed the ritual. The final words carried through the basement with force, rattling the candles and sending the shadows into a frenzy of movement. Then everything stopped. The candles froze mid-blink. The shadows went completely still. In that moment of perfect silence, I felt a rush of awareness flooding into my mind. Suddenly, I could sense every corner of the warehouse above us, every aisle, every shelf, every hidden space. More importantly, I could feel the entities, dozens of them spread throughout the building. Some were dormant, barely conscious. Others were active, testing boundaries, searching for weaknesses. I could identify each one individually. The tall one that had watched me in aisle 12, the whisperer that mimicked voices I knew, the cold spot in the east wing that drained energy from anything nearby. The moment of stillness broke. Pain shot through my body as the entities realized what had happened. They pushed against the barriers, testing this new connection, trying to break free. I gasped, doubling over but keeping my hands firmly on the book. "Direct them back," Jack instructed urgently. "Use the connection. Push them away from the boundaries." I didn't understand how, but somehow I knew what to do. I focused on how the entities felt, picturing the edges that kept them in place. I used something in my mind I'd never tried before, pushing back when they tested the weak spots. They fought back at first, but after a while they didn't push as hard. The pain eased up to just a dull ache. I stood up straighter still, working to keep those edges strong in my mind. "Good," Jack said, his voice revealing both relief and exhaustion. "You've stabilized the immediate breach points. The rest will come with practice." I took my hands off the book, thinking the connection might stop, but it stayed there like a feeling in the back of my head. I could somehow tell the warehouse was above us, and I knew how big it was and what was inside it in a way that felt totally weird. "What now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Now you learn," Jack replied. "Everything in the book, all the rituals for maintaining the different containment points, the nature of each entity and how to manage it." He gestured to the symbols painted between the chalk circles. "These will need to be refreshed daily," the candles replaced words spoken. "And I'll help you transition, teach you what you need to know." Jack's posture had already changed, the rigidity gone from his shoulders, his breathing easier. I can feel the connection fading from me. It's strange, like losing a sense I've had for so long, I forgot it wasn't natural. As we left the ritual space and climbed back to the main floor, I noticed the warehouse differently now. The shadows that looked so scary before now seemed almost like I knew them. I could tell where they started and stopped. The tall person kept following us from behind, but now I knew it couldn't come through certain doorways unless I let it. The night shift can return tomorrow, Jack said as we walked through the main floor. The immediate crisis has passed. He glanced at me. Though you'll need to be here most of the time now, especially at first while you're learning to maintain the boundaries properly. I nodded, the reality of my decision hitting me. I had just signed away my freedom, tied myself to this building and whatever was inside it. Part of me already regretted it. Another part knew I didn't really have a choice, not if I wanted to stop the disasters Jack had talked about. I'll need to make arrangements, I said. My apartment, my things, that can be handled. There's a small living space in the administrative wing. Previous keepers have used it when needed. Jack's expression softened slightly. I know this isn't the life you wanted, Tom. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. 1 week later, I stood in Jack's old office looking out the window as a young woman walked from the parking lot to the employee entrance. She held her purse close, looking nervous. The past 7 days had been crazy. Jack spent every waking hour teaching me about the weird things in the warehouse, the rituals, the history, and what each one was like. I learned to feel when the barriers were getting weak and which things were active and which were sleeping. Jack left yesterday, driving away from the warehouse for the first time in 15 years without the pain pulling him back. Now I watched the new hire, Michelle Roberts, come toward the building that had become my prison and my job. I checked my watch. 7:50 a.m. I felt the tall thing in aisle 12 getting jumpy about someone new. I pushed it back in my head. The other thing stayed mostly quiet, though the one that whispers in the north wing had woken up pushing against its edges like it always did when new people came in. I grabbed the folder with Michelle's paperwork and headed to the employee entrance to meet her. As I walked, I felt each thing I passed by, keeping them in check. It was getting easier with practice, though I still had to pay attention constantly. Michelle Roberts looked up when I got to the door. She had dark hair tied back and wore simple, practical clothes for warehouse work. She looked worried but ready. "Michelle," I said, opening the door. "I'm Thomas Wright, the warehouse manager. Welcome to your first day." "Thank you," she replied, her hands fidgeting slightly. "I'm a little nervous. This is my first warehouse position. Don't worry, we'll get you trained properly." I led her toward what had been Jack's office, now mine. "We'll start with some paperwork, then I'll show you around." She completed the forms while I explained the basic stuff: inventory management, shipping rules, break schedules, all the normal parts of warehouse work that covered up what really happened here. After she finished the paperwork, I took her on the same tour Jack had given me: the break room, the locker area, the main warehouse floor, with its tall metal shelving and yellow-lined concrete paths. Throughout the tour, I felt the entity's attention moving, following us as we walked through their territory. I kept the boundaries in check with part of my mind while talking with Michelle. When we returned to the office, I pulled out the typed sheet titled Warehouse Rules and placed it on the desk between us. As Jack had done with me, I let my smile fade, my face getting serious. "These are mandatory procedures, Michelle, not suggestions." She took the paper, her eyes looking over the list of rules. I watched her reactions carefully, trying to see if she could spot the entities like I could. Most employees would find the rules strange, but accept them as odd corporate policies. Those who could actually see would react differently. As Michelle read about not acknowledging the tall person in the shadows, her eyes got a little wider when she reached the rule about never responding.